Då i vårt mörka hus träder med tända ljus Santa Lucia, Santa Lucia. So this is a wonderful type of cultural diplomacy at once, because as you all hear, this is not a typical Swedish tune. It's an Italian canzone napolitano, which the Swedes have borrowed to celebrate the Queen of Light in the darkest period of the year. So, but this is not the theme today. It's not about Sweden or Lucia or dark. It's about the idea to create a forum, a pan-European forum for all sorts of artists, intellectuals, cultural active persons, also historians, philosophers, etc. This idea was born, as a matter of fact, first in the back of my head when I was in charge of cultural affairs and Sweden promotion at the end of the 1990s. At the same time, Stockholm had the honor to be a European capital of culture. And in that connection, we took the opportunity to invite a person whom I knew rather well, namely the intendant, the general director of the Salzburg Festival, the Salzburg Opera Festival, Gérard Mortier, a wonderful, unfortunately he died 2 years ago, a wonderful personality of European music, who was active both in La Monnaie in Belgium, in Bastille in Paris, in Teatro Real in Madrid, and of course, as I said, the Salzburg Festival. Anyway, he came to give a speech, and he said, well, this is all very fine, this with Stockholm, capital of culture, and also with this enthusiasm which we Swedes at the time, 1998, 1999, we had a lot of enthusiasm about being now finally members of the European Union since 1995. So he said, there's more to it, he said. You have to somehow find a forum where the cultural personalities are really meeting and discussing Europe from that point of view. That was the first little seed which came into my mind. Then I met some other people whom I had learned to know over the years, some ministers of culture from various parts of Europe, and at a certain stage we met in first in the Swedish connected Schloss Mainau in southern Germany, and finally at the premises of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg to found the European Cultural Parliament, which the idea was that this would be the forum for cultural personalities who wish to discuss not their own social problems, the level of fees or the working conditions in various concert halls or in museums or theaters and so on, but to discuss Europe from a cultural, artistic, philosophical, historical, and let's say soft power point of view. So the decision was taken then to found this organization. It was symbolic that we met at the premises of the Council of Europe, because it was clear for us immediately that the borders here for membership of such an organization should not be the European Union, neither the European Union of 2001, which, as you know, was much smaller than today, nor the future European Union, which will grow then later on to 28. But the frontier should rather be, or the border should rather be, the Council of Europe, which has 40 47 member countries, and which leaves the doors open also for countries from Caucasus, from Russia, from Turkey, etc. So it was that was an important statement, and it was an important statement that there should be a few excellent representatives from each country. So we started with a little group of some 25, 30 persons from about 15 different countries, and then it has been growing. So, and how does it grow? Well, it grows like many academies, that an academician, a member, may nominate another or two new members. But the point here was it should be European, so he or she should nominate somebody from another country than his own or her own. So that is how we have now then been growing organically, as I call it, growing to become today essentially bigger. The first session we had was in the Belgian city of Bruges, which happened to be the capital of culture of Europe in 2002. We have kept a rather close cooperation with coming capitals of culture. We went, for instance, then later on also to Genoa, we went to Graz, we were in Liverpool, we were in Lisbon, etc. So we have had so far, since then, time is rushing, so we have already had 16 different sessions. Our inspiration during these brainstormings that we had after these inspirational words by Gérard Mortier was another musician, namely the famous Israeli, German, Swiss, American violinist Yehudi Menuhin, who said in one of his last years of life, he died in 1999, he said, "The artists need a parliament." I've heard a lot of his recordings and so on. I have never met him live, so I've never had the chance to ask him what he really meant by this. So when we created the European Culture Parliament, that was our interpretation of this expression of his, that the artists need a parliament. I think it's easy to underline the idea that artists have, because there is always a risk that people in the arts are defined only as a decoration of something which is, so to say, more important. Whereas history shows us that both artists and painters and authors and the creative people from the arts and culture, they have really set the tone of history. They have been so important. If we look back 300, 400, 500 years back, whom do we remember? We hardly remember the politicians. And excuse me for those who are in politics here. But we do remember the artists, the authors, the philosophers, etc. So that was one inspiration from Yehudi Menuhin. The other one came from one of the leading Europeans, namely Jacques Delors, who was in a very successful period of the European project, I would say, when the European project became the European Union. He was the president of the Commission of the European Union, Jacques Delors, and he said at one stage that Europe has a soul. And he meant it. Some of you who are my students here heard me saying yesterday, for instance, that Russia is famous for having a soul, Ruskaya dusha. But we Europeans have sometimes forgotten, other Europeans have forgotten that perhaps Europe also has a soul. So this was an important message to us, which we tried to live from during the coming sessions. Already at the first session, we set one of the objectives or missions or mission statements, namely that ethical and aesthetic values should be the essence of the European society. Hope everybody survived. Now, so the ethical and aesthetic values are, of course, very often left aside in the European discussion. And we were also and are aware of the fact that culture and arts is not a mandate of the European Union. The European Union has refers to culture and arts in their preamble. That we have a common European heritage, etc. But when it comes to business, so to say, culture is the responsibility of the various 28 members of the European Union. So, but there should be something between the lines, or perhaps hanging a little bit in the sky over our heads, and that should be this idea that ethical and aesthetic values are really the essence. And of course, the other one, which has become, has got more and more recognition, I would say, in late years, is that culture is the core of society, and that creativity is the source of human existence. I think everybody can underline that, even if the person in question has never touched a violin or sung a tone or made a painting. So the creativity is what keeps the world and Europe going, of course. Now, we have grown. We have made a kind of a ceiling here, so we are around 160. From that, we cannot grow indefinitely. It would be very difficult to handle. So some people are leaving simply because they don't have time anymore. They are so busy doing their arts and so on, and some others are coming every year. And we have 160 plus members from 43 European countries. We are almost, we have individuals from almost all Council of Europe members. And they are outstanding visual artists, like, for instance, Michelangelo Pistoletto from Italy. We have fantastic musicians, like Dudana Masviashvili, who will be here tomorrow, by the way, from Georgia. We have wonderful authors, like Laura Freisa from Barcelona and Madrid. We have great architects like Yevgeny Ast from Moscow, great philosophers like Stelios Varvadikis from Athens, and historians like Marie-Louise von Plessen from Germany and France. So it's a fantastic group of people, and some of them you will meet as from tomorrow morning. They will be here at ICD as part of this annual conference. And I'm very happy, by the way, Mark is not in the room, but anyway, that we can concretize our cooperation so strongly through this annual conference, where some 20 members of our ECP will be here to have a workshop in the other room, and some of them will speak in this room as well. So we see each other as an important bridge between us, artists from the EU countries and from artists from the neighboring countries. I mentioned Georgian. We have also from Armenia, from Azerbaijan, from Ukraine, also from Belarus, although they are not members of the Council of Europe, but we have them in our parliament. Now, first of all, why do we call itself parliament? That is perhaps, I often get this question, because it isn't a parliament. People are not elected by the European population or anything like that. They are, but they are there to discuss like parliamentarians, and they are nominated. So we call it a parliament partly as a provocation. Because after all, if I say there's a European Cultural Parliament, well, of course, people feel, well, how can you be a parliament? It opens a discussion immediately. And discussion is what cultural diplomacy is all about, isn't it? So that is one of the reasons. I should also say we are an NGO. not affiliated in any way to the European Commission, to the European Parliament, or anything. We have a cooperation. Very few occasions we have received some funds for some workshop, but basically speaking, we are based on voluntary work and with a strong cooperation and some financing from the host cities. We have had 16 different host cities so far. We hope, by the way, to be in Armenia next year. Yeah, I'll speak with you about that. The various themes we chose. There are as many as sessions, but here are some of them. We discussed democracy, of course. We are discussing human rights, always under the motto, what can artists, cultural personalities do for human rights and for promoting democracy? So, intercultural dialogue has been a self-evident theme in the last 10 years or so. Media, extremely important. Of course, facing some sort of identity crisis in these years. Values, we had a whole session about values, European values, global values. Cultural identities, one of the real popular issues these years, where people rather prefer to identify themselves with identities than, let's say, ideologies or even religions. Now, of course, we speak about European cohesion. And that because that is always at stake. Is there more cohesion or is it splitting up? Migration, a very big theme, and has of course been touched by us last year, for instance, in Rotterdam. And the role of arts and culture is there all the time, one way or another. Now, at the conference here, tomorrow morning, I can recommend some interventions from members of the ECP. Per Stenbeck, from Finland, he was Minister for Foreign Affairs and also Minister for Education and Culture. And he just recently wrote a book about democracy and the crisis or the challenges for democracy in these years. Steve Austin is a well-known, let's say, European cultural personality. He's founder of the Felix Meritis Foundation in Amsterdam and one of the co-founders of our sister organization, Soul for Europe, with its basis here in Berlin. Mary Miller started as a violinist, then became a cultural manager. She is from Scotland, but the last 10 years she has spent in Norway, and now she is the artistic and general director of the Norwegian Opera House in Bergen, West Norway. Ove Johansson is a legendary Swedish journalist. Many, I think 2 decades he was in the United States. Then he became president of the Swedish broadcasting system. He was also president of the European Broadcasting Union. So he's, let's say, one of the gurus in terms of media, and he will ask the question tomorrow. The media can save the world. Democracy of the world, but who can save the media? Since there is a type of crisis around the corner. Erna Hennico-Schöpkes has 2 hats here. She is a member of our Senate, our board, and she is also a member of the advisory board of ICD. And she was Minister for Culture of Luxembourg, and she was also chairman of the Cultural Committee in the European Parliament. So, and then there will be they are speaking in the morning tomorrow, and in the afternoon at 6 o'clock there will be a panel discussion led by Mary Miller, and the Italian philosopher Massimo Dell'Utri will be there. The German dramaturg, scenographer Heike Hagebölling will be there. The Swedish, Belgian, Finnish cultural strategist Johanna Suo will be there, and the French president of Fondation Vasserali will be there as well. Parallelly, we will also run a workshop here. So the ECP, to conclude, is the only existing pan-European interdisciplinary forum or network in arts and culture, and that is our email. Thank you very much for your attention.